I'm not sure what it is. I don't know if it's stress. I don't know if we just can't sleep. But what is it about getting up when we're supposed to be in bed and either scrolling through on YouTube or watching something on our phone, or we turn on the TV and we start just kind of getting caught, just watching these infomercials or long commercials over and over? I mean, what causes us at 2 a.m. to say, I want to buy that? I mean, they do such a great job of selling the product that we go, I can't live without that. I thought it'd be good for us you may be thinking, man, I don't know what you're talking about, but really, maybe you just need a little reminder. Maybe it's just some images that can kind of help us. Well, the first one, you remember the Snuggie. The Snuggie, it was, the commercial said, blankets can slide. Hands are trapped inside. It keeps you warm, and one size fits all. And I'm just going to tell you, as somebody that I have challenged that statement my whole life, one size doesn't fit all. The ShamWow. You always say, wow. Is it a chamois? Is it a towel? Is it a sponge? We don't know, but it sells. The Chia Pet. I mean, when you start reading about the Chia Pet, it's the pet that is a plant. If you dip it in water and you spread the seed, it'll grow. It's a miracle. And we talk to it all day long. Now, OxiClean, you can't forget OxiClean. It unleashes the power of oxygen. Don't just clean it, you OxiClean it. And what about the Ginsu knives? I mean, this was a miracle. The Ginsu knives, they can cut a tomato and they can slice a can in half. Now, I don't know how many of y'all's mamas cut cans in half, but this would have been the perfect gift. And wait, there's more. 50-year guarantee. But this last one is the one that really kind of rattled me. This is the one that I just couldn't watch, and I always found a way either to turn the channel or to skip the video. It's the Sarah McLachlan Adopt a Pet. Nobody wants that. We can't see those images, and that song would resonate, and as soon as it started playing, we had to get it off the screen. See, we are moved by the music and the images. That song, it is forever linked to adopt a pet. And there's nothing wrong with adopting pets. There's nothing wrong with finding those animals that have been abused and bringing them home, but to sit and to watch 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, I couldn't do it. So here's what I want you to do. Take the next few moments and either in your home or on the chat room, answer a few of these questions. What is the craziest item you ever purchased on a late night infomercial? And when you hear the pet adoption song come on, do you skip forward or do you watch and listen? Hey, don't forget, kids, make sure you're grabbing everything you can to make your sheep. Be right back in just a few moments. Now, I got to be honest, most of the infomercials that I just listed off and talked to you about, they drive me nuts. I can't bear them. I don't know that I've ever gotten up late and bought something late at night like that. But there's something about the pet commercial that really kind of bothers me. And when I was younger, I did like scary movies. I liked that feeling of being on edge, on the edge of my seat, and maybe the nerves rattled a little bit. But as Ashley and I had children, watching human suffering, I just couldn't do it anymore. There was something about it that I just didn't want to watch those type of movies any longer. And it's going to sound kind of weird, but a war movie, it was justified. But just senseless torture or something like that, I just couldn't deal with. But when you see these animals that have been abused and neglected, it bothered me. I just couldn't deal with it. And what we would do is just turn the channel. Maybe you've seen that type of infomercial or another video that's come on when you've been watching YouTube or whatever you're looking at, and you just hit the skip button to the next one. You turn it. You don't want to be a part of it. Maybe you only watch for that brief moment of time that says you have 7 seconds or 8 seconds that you have to watch with the advertisement. See, we're really good. I'm really good at moving past the video that bothers me. So today we want to continue our series in loving our neighbor. Jesus was really pretty serious about this. The last few weeks, we've talked about crossing the road. We've talked about taking a risk. We've talked about serving our neighbor. Today, we're going to talk about seeing our neighbor. And this subject is going to be pretty challenging for some. This subject is in the headlines of every news outlet. You probably have not been able to get away from it in the last week. It's also a subject that requires a ton of grace. Because this subject, for whatever reason, it brings up extreme anger, and apathy abounds. See, the United States right now, we are not currently so united. In fact, we are completely fractured and divided. Politics, race, economics, and then you add on top of that, tensions are already high. We're frustrated. We've got challenges with COVID and health and safety. The economy looks like a yo-yo. There are jobs and loss of jobs. There are some real challenges facing our nation and our world. See, there are some people, when you begin to talk about race, they automatically shut off and quit listening. They turn the channel or they skip forward. I am humbly asking you to stick with me. I'm not going to talk about politics. I am going to talk about some kingdom principles. I think a question that maybe you and I have to have a serious retrospective look into ourselves and ask this question: is my politics hurting my testimony? Am I unable to follow the principles of the kingdom because I am following the principles of a political party first? There may be an opportunity here for us to really grow as Jesus followers in what we do and what we say. If you are like me, then watching the video of George Floyd this week has left me speechless. What I wanted to do in that almost 10-minute video was to skip forward or to turn the channel. But maybe what's happened is that we have all been skipping forward way too long. See, I believe we are lacking empathy and we have become a callous culture. And this isn't anything about bashing our law authorities. I have the utmost respect and admiration for our friends in blue. I'm a chaplain for the Valparaiso Police Department. I carry my badge with pride. I love being around those men and women who serve and give. We can all agree there are bad policemen in the world, just like we can say there's bad accountants. There are terrible bad pastors and clergy, construction workers, attorneys. There are entire industries that face these types of challenges, but we don't throw them out completely. But how does this really apply to us when we talk about loving our neighbor? And I think it comes down to a few things. Are we really seeing the pain? Are we really watching and observing the anguish? See, I've spent this week talking to my friends that are African American. From Alabama to California to here in Valparaiso. These are men that I've either watched grow up, they were part of my youth ministry, part of our family, friends that I played high school football with. I've shared locker rooms, I've been to their weddings, I've performed their wedding ceremonies, and I've watched them play sports. And as I talk to these different men and finding out what they feel, one word kept rising to the top. And it was empathy. And if you're not aware that empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. Empathy is what happens to us when we see someone else's pain and we feel it. We see someone else's anguish and it boils up inside of us. When we see injustice, we rise up. Empathy is what causes us to act and move. In Psychology Today, there was an article written by Dr. Rick Hansen a few years ago. And kind of the summary of the article is this. He goes, we're usually fully aware of our own suffering. If you and I are in pain, we're aware of it. We know it. We see it. We can identify it. We can talk about it. We can actually pinpoint it. And some of us are even able to go back and say, this is the point in time my pain began. This is when it was. It was when my parents were divorced. This is when I lost a spouse. This was when my sibling passed away. This is when we had to move across country because of job loss. Whatever it may be, we can identify the pain and the suffering. And it includes this whole range of physical to mental discomfort. But however, when it comes to seeing the suffering in others, it's not near as common for us to identify it. See, all the news and pictures of disaster and murder and grief, they bombard us each day. Many of us have stopped watching the news because we can't process it. It is always so negative. It is always so down. It is always so full of hate. It is always so full of tragedy. I don't want to watch it, so I skip forward or I turn the channel. What's happened is, ironically, we have become numb to the suffering of others. We've become numb to it in our own country and across the globe. See, it's easy for us to tune out the stress and the strain and the uneasiness and the anger that we see in our neighbors. It's easy for us just to move on. It's easy for us just to pat them on the back and say, good luck next time. But see, I think there's even a little more to this, that we get caught in the tension of trying to understand the why and the how they're hurting instead of just acknowledging the pain is real. We stop acknowledging that their pain is real. We want to break it down. We want to compare it to our story. We want to compare it to our family story. We want to begin to tell them that you got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You can make it. You can do it. If you really want it, you can achieve it. And we fail to acknowledge that there is real, absolute pain. I'm guilty of this. I think the church is guilty of this. That we have lacked the empathy to see our world as it really is. Instead, we choose to see it how we want it to be. Therefore, we failed. I failed. Fortunate for us, we've got some great stories in Scripture that show empathy. A few weeks ago, we talked about the Good Samaritan. This passage in Luke that talks about all the people that should have stopped and helped the man that had been beaten and left for dead. All of the people that should have risen to the occasion but did not. And it was the Samaritan, the enemy of the Jew, who stopped and took care of him. And they hated each other. In Luke chapter 10, verse 33 out of the Message, it says this: a Samaritan traveling the road came on him, and when he saw the man's condition, his heart went out to him. He gave him first aid, disinfecting and bandaging his wounds. Then he lifted him onto his donkey. He led him to an inn, and he made him comfortable. In the morning, he took out 2 silver coins, and he gave them to the innkeeper, saying, "Take good care of him. If it costs any more, put it on my bill, and I'll pay you on my way back." See, the Samaritan was moved by the situation. The Samaritan saw it, and it moved him. It moved him to action. This is empathy. So what moves us? What will it take? I know it's easier to skip forward. I know it's easier to turn the channel, and it feels better than to have all those emotions and feelings rise up. But I wonder what it means to us to let our hearts be moved. Another story about Jesus in Luke 7. A widow who had already obviously lost her husband is now in the process of burying her son. And it talks about Jesus sees her pain. In Luke chapter 7, verse 11, out of the NIV, it says, soon afterward, Jesus went to a town called Nain, and his disciples and a large crowd went along with him. As he approached the town gate, a dead person was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. And a large crowd from the town was with her, and when the Lord saw her, his heart went out to her, and he said, don't cry. Again, Jesus sees her. Later on in that passage, Jesus actually raises her son back to life, and he gives the son back over to her. See, to see these situations, to see that Jesus' heart went out, maybe we need to be looking more. I know for me, and maybe you, probably you, we become so involved in our own bubble, in our own little world, in our own little community, in our own little house. I know it's safe there. I know that we can put up our walls and we can hide there, but there's a hurting world all around us. And we miss what's going on. It would have been easy for Jesus to put his head down and walk right by. But it said he saw her and his heart went out to her. A great story about the prodigal son. Many of you have heard this story. You have seen this story. We've all taught from this story. This young man basically tells his dad, I wish you were dead and I had all that you had. I just want to be on my own. The young man goes out. The dad honors the young man, his son's wishes, and he sends him out and he gives him half of his inheritance, and the young man loses everything. And he decides to return home. Ask for forgiveness and just say, I'll be a servant. I don't even want to be your son anymore. I don't deserve it. Luke 15, verse 20 out of the Message says this. He goes, when he was still a long way off, his father saw him, his heart pounding. And he ran out, he embraced him, and he kissed him. And the son started his speech, Father, I've sinned against God. I've sinned before you. I don't deserve to be called your son ever again. Heart pounding. See, this would have been a great opportunity for the dad to say, I told you so. This would have been a great opportunity for the dad to say, you're right, you don't deserve to be my son. I will take you back because I'm actually looking for good help. You could go live with the servants. You could go live with the people that are going to take care of my cattle. They're going to take care of my fields. This was not the time to prove who was right or wrong. This was the time to allow a father to grieve and to celebrate his son had returned. It wasn't about being right. It was about the celebration of a lost son coming home who he thought was dead and had now been found. And the dad basically tells him, you are mine. You're mine. I see you. In the next few moments, I'd like you to talk about this in your home or in the chat room. When you read these passages about Jesus, his heart being moved, what does that say to you? How does it make you feel? Second question is, when was the last time your heart was moved for or by someone or something, and why? Take a few moments now and talk about this. See, when our heart is moved, we begin to see people and their situations. To be honest with you and frank with you, that when you read this passage out of Matthew 18, verse 12, it didn't always make sense to me. In fact, it didn't seem fair. It used to really bother me. And I was challenged with it, and I would hear it in songs, and I would read it, and I would think, that just isn't right, Jesus. But it's Matthew 18, verse 12 says, what do you think? If a man owns 100 sheep and one of them wanders away, will he not leave the 99 on the hills and go to look for the one that wandered off? And if he finds it, I tell you, he is happier about that one sheep than about the 99 that did not wander off. In the same way, your Father in heaven is not willing that any of these little ones should perish. I mean, how can it be that finding the one is more important than the 99? I've struggled with this. Now, I got to tell you, as a youth pastor, when we went on mission trips out of the country, and if I had 50, I never thought to myself, I should bring one back over 49. It never crossed my mind. It was we had to bring them all home, and that's what we wanted to do. But in this passage, does this really mean that finding the one is more important than the 99? Are we putting less value on the 99? I mean, what are we doing here? And that's really not what's happening. It's not it at all. It's about identifying the hurting. It's about realizing those around us that are suffering, that have wandered off. It's about saying that the 99 are just as important, they're just as valuable as the one, but it's the one who is hurting. It's the one that is marginalized. It is the one that doesn't know where to go and is lost. It is about the one who needs a shepherd to come alongside them. It's not creating a either or. It's creating a passageway for us to understand the value of seeing the hurting. See, God is calling us, His people, you and I. He's calling us to find the one. See, I think one of these most astonishing thoughts in all of this is that God is calling us to His mission. His mission on earth. He's calling us. And he has chosen us to use as ambassadors to accomplish his goal and his mission on earth. See, in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 18, it says this, all of this is from God, who reconciled us to himself through Christ and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. That God was reconciling the world to himself in Christ, not counting people's sins against them. And he has committed to us the message of reconciliation. We are therefore Christ's ambassadors. As though God were making his appeal through us. And we implore you, on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God. See, in order for us to participate in this mission, we too must leave behind some things that are hindering us. We've got to go after those who have not yet been reconciled by him. We must leave our comfort zones. We must leave our selfish desires behind. It is his mission to find the one. It is his mission to find that lost sheep. See, you are not a Republican or a Democrat who follows Christ. Being an ambassador trumps your political affiliation. Being an ambassador for Christ trumps your political affiliation and who you will vote for or not vote for. You and I are being called out. I want you to just take a moment now, at home or in the chat room. And when you read these passages that Jesus would leave the 99 for the one, how does that make you feel? What does that mean to you? And as an ambassador of Christ, how can we reconcile with our brothers and sisters that feel marginalized and neglected in this world? Take a few moments now and talk about this. I can only speak for myself, but I need to say I'm sorry. My heart is breaking. What if George Floyd was your son, your brother, your father, or your friend? I don't know how I'd respond. But I've spent too much time in my life skipping or turning the channel. Maybe I thought it didn't apply to me. Maybe I thought that I haven't had some of those issues. Maybe I've even just gotten the benefit of the doubt. But it is time that we see people. We see their pain. We don't even have to understand it. You don't even have to necessarily agree with it, but we got to recognize it. We got to recognize it and see people for who they are. That we know that our world is imploding all around us. Everywhere we look, I feel like its fuse is lit on both ends and it's coming to the middle. And I wonder if the world is looking for the church to say, where are you? Where are you? And what are you going to do? What are you going to do? As I talked to my friends this week, I apologized to them. I said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't always understand it. I don't even all the time agree. But I'm sorry you're hurting. I'm sorry you feel like the church and your world doesn't care. And I'm sorry. As we close today, we're going to sing Reckless Love. Because there's a couple of lines in this song that has moved me. It chases me down. It fights till I'm found. It leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it. Still, you give yourself away. What I'm going to ask you to do in your home or in your office today, if you're willing to fight for our neighbors, if you're willing to see your neighbors, then I'm going to ask you to stand in your home or in your office, wherever you are. If you're driving, pull over. Pull over and take a moment as we sing this song that I'm not going to go on as business as usual. I'm not going to write it off as this doesn't apply to me. I'm not going to let it just happen, all my world burning all around me. Then I'm going to choose to see my neighbor. I'm going to ask now that I pray as we get ready to sing this song. I'm going to ask you to just have an honest assessment of how you're seeing your neighbor. Father God, thank you so much for the day. Father, I'm sorry if we failed you. And I ask, you give us the courage to see. You give us the courage to walk across the yard, to cross the road, to serve and to see our neighbors, and to love them, that allow our hearts to be moved. And you give us the courage and the strength to do that. And we ask these things in your powerful and wonderful name. Amen.